I'm going to tell you why I don't take either your or my own opinions about music and performers too seriously. And then I'm going to tell you why you absolutely must have an opinion anyway. Sounds like a contradiction? Stay with me, because it isn't. I'll also tell you why many agents don't really care how their own artists play. And I'll share a secret to a happy life even when someone insults me or devalues my opinions. Last week I made a video about Pogorelic and it sparked very different reactions. One trend in the comments, which I honestly counted on, caught my attention as always. It happens every time when somebody comments on another pianist playing, and that comment is anything less than 100% praise. Immediately the fan of that pianist would be like, why don't you just let people play the way they want? Why should music be played in one specific way, and so on? So let me clarify something. Criticizing someone's playing does not necessarily mean attacking or devaluing them. But before I explain that, let me tell you a story about myself, and it's not a flattering one, to be honest. But before we continue, a quick announcement. If you are interested in a free 40-minute lesson on piano efficiency and healthy technique, as well as one of the biggest discounts I've offered recently on my most important courses, make sure to register for free using the link below. And if you are a piano beginner, you can also download my free PDF guide to help you avoid common mistakes and save yourself years of unnecessary struggle. Register now by following the link below. When I was about 20, I went to a concert in Finland. A young Finnish pianist was playing a Chopin concerto, and he played it in a way I simply couldn't accept. Now remember, I was 20, I was idealistic, I knew how one had to play, and I was extremely rigorous about it, and about how one should play piano. And there was this very young and very talented guy, but with very eccentric gestures, with what I could only describe at the time as bad taste and rude playing, basically butchering this concerto and doing it very enthusiastically. I was enraged. I sat there thinking, oh my God, why he's doing this to me? Why he's doing that to Chopin, to music? How dare he to play this way?
How dare you?
I was literally boiling in negativity. At some point, even my heart started hurting, and I'm not exaggerating. I became afraid for my life. I genuinely thought I was going to have a heart attack at the age of 20 in a concert hall, right? But it was really real. It felt really real. That's how deeply unsettling I found this performance. And then it ended. And since he was local, so half of the hall was his friends and family, and they gave him a tremendous ovation. People were shouting like, bravo, bravo. And that made me even more furious. Those people were celebrating a man who, in my opinion, had just committed a crime against this piece. He should go to jail. Instead, he gets a standing ovation. I was so enraged about this injustice as I saw it. And here's the punchline, which took me years to understand. This was misery I chose. Nobody did that to me. I did it to myself. I believed that I knew how this piece had to be played, and therefore anybody who played it differently or not upon my standards didn't have the right to perform this music at all. So every performance that didn't match my expectation felt like a personal insult. And I would go through the whole spectrum, like secondhand embarrassment for that person, or anger, or rejection. And this is a problem, in my opinion, because the moment we start believing that our expectation is the only correct one, we condemn ourselves to an enormous amount of misery. And I want to say something here that many of you might not like, but I think it's a useful pill to swallow if you want less negativity in your life in general and around art specifically. Music is what we choose it to be. So if you choose to believe music is a kind of like a sacred process, almost like a religion where you have to perform very specific rituals to stay faithful for this truth, then you will suffer every single time somebody does it wrong. If you choose to believe music has a duty to, let's say, educate, then you will reject anything you consider morally insufficient. For example, I have a relative who sincerely believes that music, the main purpose of music, that it should make people behave better and become nobler, purer human beings. For a person with that view, which at first may seem like, that's a great view, right? Music makes us nobler, it educates us. It's very good, right? But if you're stuck in that view, then, for example, a very sensual piece called something like Sex on the Beach is a genuine problem because it's immoral, not educational, not acceptable for children. Therefore, just ban it, destroy it, cancel it. You see the mechanism? The moment you build a strict expectation about what music must be and what purpose it must serve, you start restricting the creative potential of the human beings who make art. So here's my take, and it's very down to earth. For me, art is a form of expressing something that matters to you. And everyone of us has different values, different preferences, different taste. And I respect the right of every person to express themselves the way they want. I believe that every human being has a, let's call it a God's particle, an urge to create and express, and art is simply one way of doing this. And at the same time, pragmatically speaking, artist is a brand. A performance, it's a product, and I, sitting in the hall, am the consumer. And as a consumer, I get to choose whether I like this product or not. But making that choice does not require me to become enraged. I might listen to one pianist because their playing makes me happy, and there might be another pianist whose interpretation simply does not convince me. It's my right to like it or not like it. It's my right not to listen. It's also my right to say out loud that I'm not convinced, that I don't like it. None of that means that when I criticize a particular performance, I devalue them as a human being or artist. And it certainly doesn't mean that I have to be outraged by their existence. But at the same time, other people confronting my opinion, which differs from theirs, must learn to live with it, right? So this is the frame that changed everything for me. I think of every artist purely as a brand, a personal brand, targeted to a specific audience, existing for a specific target audience. So every artist has a unique style, and that style covers a certain niche. Maybe you want, let's say, highly spiritual, refined, exquisite playing, something bordering on the divine, something cathartic. Then you need someone who plays like that. I don't know, for me that would be Volodos, for example, or Sokolov maybe. Maybe you want a performer who is passionate, sensual, bright, and looks gorgeous on stage. Then you probably want somebody like Yuja Wang or Katya Bunitishvili, although that's subjective, that's my perception. For you, it can be like the other way around, I don't know. Or maybe you want someone intellectual, someone who plays in a very smart way, and you don't mind it if it's a little bit academic or even a little bit maybe boring at times. Because sitting through an entire recital of Bach, played conservatively and with kind of restraint and with a stylistic impeccability, makes you feel smarter. It makes you feel cultured. So you can sit through this and enjoy it, while most people actually can't. And so then, of course, you go for someone like maybe, I don't know, Andras Schiff. So every performer covers a certain segment of the audience. And this is why when I don't like somebody's performance, I no longer say that what they do has no right to exist. I can simply admit that this is a successful person. This is a very talented person. They are extremely successful and they deserve their success. I'm just not their target audience. And I'm not insulted that somebody loves what I dislike or dislikes what I love, because we are all different and we need different things to be happy. Now, a very important part for music students, because nobody's going to teach you this at the conservatory. So far, this has been about how I reached my peace of mind, and I hope that it might help to some of you to reach yours. Now let's talk about money and career, because there's a practical side to all of this that nobody explains to students. If you want a career in music, you have to understand that different people listen to you differently. And this actually will help you to reduce anxiety at your performances a lot. And I have a special video about anxiety, stage anxiety, and how to combat it. But this is also a very important piece of puzzle which you have to understand. So I call this the listener's position. And there are many. I want to highlight three. So the first position is, let's call it the professor's position. When you come to a lesson, your professor listens critically. Boiled down to its simplest possible form, there are three possible outcomes. So I, as a professor, might be in a position that you didn't meet my expectations, bad job. Or you met my expectations, you did exactly what I wanted you, and therefore, good job. Or the third most, let's say, rare outcome is, wow, you surprised me in a positive way. I didn't expect this, but you actually made something your own and you convinced me. Awesome job. And I, as a teacher, of course, I'm super happy when we get to the third scenario. And you, as a music student, also should aim to get to the third scenario as often as possible, where not only you convince your teacher that you're not an amateur anymore, but you actually do something genuinely creative, which they don't expect, and nevertheless, they are convinced. Because this is where you become a true artist and not just a student. And this position, this listening position, isn't limited to professors, because most professional musicians listen from here. We listen critically. That's exactly why we're so hard to convince and sometimes hard to genuinely please. And very often it's genuinely hard to just forget about your feedback generating and just immerse yourself in a piano performance, because I listen critically. I can't forget about it, about myself having that expertise to judge. That's why being a professional gives you an enormous advantage. You're experienced, your ear is very sharp, you can catch tiny details that most people can't, and you can judge them with expertise. But it also makes you close-minded in a certain sense, because you've built a very firm idea of what you like. So I accept the fact that my expertise makes me a good teacher, a proficient, successful pianist, but at the same time, it makes me a close-minded person, because very often I just can't accept some things. So it becomes to sell your shit, but you also become extremely picky about what you eat and very rarely genuinely enjoy things. The second position is the audience member's position. These are not professionals, by large. They are music lovers, and they didn't come to judge you. They came to enjoy themselves, not yourself, themselves. And that's also important to understand. So they evaluate you by one measure primarily. How much enjoyment did you give them? They will forgive you all kinds of mistakes, and honestly, they won't even notice most of them if you deliver a show that they genuinely love. And this is something very, very liberating that you have to understand in order to get rid of stage fright. So when you go on stage to play in front of the audience, only 1 to 3% of your audience is likely to listen to you from a professor's position. Those would be like professional musicians who know these pieces. But the vast majority of people who come to the concerts are going to listen to you from an audience perspective. So they don't really care about judging you or whether you do this or that wrong or right. They come to enjoy. And as soon as you understand this, you can be much more free, relaxed, confident, and just enjoy yourself on stage. But now there's a third position which I want to highlight, especially for those who aim to make a career in music. If you're an emerging artist, you desperately want an influential agent or manager in your hall. And here's actually a small tip for those of you who already perform. If you go to perform in a town or a city, try to research what kind of venue runners, influential people, agents, festival directors live in that city, and do your absolute best to get in contact with them beforehand and lure them to your concert, because that's a very, very tremendous opportunity. It's really hard to get these people to your concert, but it would be invaluable to establish a contact so they see that you perform well, and maybe it will lead to something. But here's what you need to understand. Those people, those managers, agents, festival directors, are not listening from the professor's position most of the time, carefully evaluating every aspect of your playing. Honestly, they don't really care how exactly you play, with which style you play. What they are evaluating, if they end up being present on your recital, is how other people behave. They're looking around at faces. Is the audience bored? Are they excited? Are they listening attentively? And what happens when you finish? Is it a polite, like half-hearted applause or genuine enthusiasm? Because for an agent, it doesn't really matter whether you satisfy their personal taste. What matters is whether they can sell you successfully, because music is also a business, and a business has to be profitable to survive. So if you think that going to your lessons somewhere, you get selected to Juilliard to study with a famous professor, and you think, okay, now I will do precisely what they want, observing every stylistical nuance, shaping every phrase the approved way, and playing strictly within this tradition, and then I will build a tremendous career, you're most probably wrong, because meeting your professor's expectations has very little to do with convincing an agent that you are a good asset they can successfully sell. Of course, how you play matters. You should be a professional and not an amateur, right? But it matters to a degree, because when it comes to building career, it matters far more how good you are at selling yourself, or how good you are at convincing somebody who knows how to sell you. And once you start seeing the industry this way, something suddenly starts making sense. It becomes clear how somebody you personally can't stand, somebody you consider to be not the best pianist with, let's say, awful taste, And suddenly that person builds a huge career anyway. Because artists are promoted by agencies, and agencies care about one fundamental question only. Can this artist assure a sold out? So after all, why should you actually form an opinion, and why I have an opinion, which I dare to share sometimes in my video analysis, which brings us back to where we started. So my opinion about somebody's playing doesn't change their career or their talent or their right to exist on stage, and neither does yours. But you still need one, because your opinion isn't a verdict on other people. It's information about you. It tells you what you value. It tells you what kind of musician you are becoming. It tells you what is most important, who your own targeted audience is going to be. So form your opinions, sharpen them, learn how to express them, hopefully in an ecological way, although honestly, there are so many people who just wait an opportunity to get insulted that no matter which form you find to express your opinion, these people will be insulted anyway. So that wouldn't be a big concern of mine. So know exactly what you like and why, but at the same time, hold your opinions loosely. And here are the two practical things that took me 20 years to realize. First, you can use your disgust as a tool. Wherever you come to an interpretation that repulses you, and you surely will, catch that moment, catch the rejection, and try to acknowledge this. Okay, I really don't like this. This makes me angry. I think that's unacceptable. And be conscious about it. And then make a deliberate effort to stretch the borders of what you consider acceptable. Not because you want to play like that, and you probably don't, and you shouldn't, but because it's an experiment. Can you actually relate to a human being who is that different from you? Can you actually understand their perspective, to imagine a reason why they, play like that, or dress like that, or behave like that, even while knowing that you'd never do this yourself? And if you watched my video about Pogorelic, you could notice that while I was not ready to accept certain things, I made my best effort to actually find a reason why he did like that, even though acknowledging that this is not my cup of tea. And then it's not a compromise on your taste. That's the difference between having your taste, your values, and an open mind as much as possible, or having a cage. And the second point is that your opinion has an expiration date, because everything changes, including you. Let me illustrate this. Years ago, I listened to a recording by an Italian pianist, and it was a wildly eccentric performance of Schumann's Fantasy. And I loved it. I thought it was the best possible recording in the world. So fresh, so spontaneous. Then I came back to the same recording about 3 years later, and I didn't like it at all. I found it so pretentious, so artificial. So the recording hadn't changed. I had. And that taught me the most important lesson of all. Don't take your own opinions too seriously. Be ready for them to change naturally as you change. Because your taste is not a monument, it's a living thing, and it's supposed to keep moving. So I would rather be concerned about someone who likes the same things when they're 20 and when they're 70, because this is actually suspicious to me. So let's have an opinion, let's learn to exchange them and to compare them and to learn from each other, but let's not confuse them with the truth, because when it comes to art, honestly, my opinion is that the truth doesn't really exist. And please don't have a heart attack in a concert hall, because I did it for you already. So thank you for watching this, and see you in the next video.